You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Hello, Pithy listeners. I'm Erica.
And I'm Caroline.
And today we are going to talk about the Islamic world. But before we get started on that, I'm going to have Caroline do some housekeeping for us.
Oh, okay. Thanks so much for all the ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it. Please keep them coming. It is a great, easy, and free way to support the podcast. And it helps all of that optimization so people can find us when they search history podcasts. Otherwise, they might find some other far less funny podcast, and we wouldn't want that for them. So
gotta look out for everybody else.
Help a girl out.
It's the right thing to do.
Other ways to support the podcast are through our Patreon, where you get early releases of episodes almost all the time.
So darn
We're
close.
so darn close on that one. Actually, usually at the beginning of the season, that maintains. And it's as the season goes on, the things get a little tighter. We also do special content and information. We post extra articles. It's a really great place to learn and dive a bit deeper. Mm-hmm. Another option is buyusacoffee.com/The Pithy Chronicle, where you can buy us a $1 coffee, which I've never heard of a $1 coffee. McDonald's is like at least $2 these days.
It's a steal.
Buy us a coffee, buy us an energy drink. It helps keep us caffeinated.
The more caffeinated we are, the funnier we are. I swear it's true.
Well, at least the sassier.
Fair enough.
So, Erica, tell us about the Islamic world.
I need to start this episode by saying that I am almost completely new to this side of the conflict. Until now...
Samesies.
Yeah, until now, I had not looked deeply into the history of Muslim rulers or Islam as a whole.
I think it talks about the way that we are presented history in the Western...
Yeah, it's all the Western European canon.
It's all through the European lens. And so it is important to find a different viewpoint. But it also means...
We're not experts.
We're not experts.
All of that is to say, today and through this series, I'm going to try my best to explain a very detailed, multifaceted culture and religion with as much care and intelligence as I can. However... there could be mistakes on our part, and by nature of our time constraints, there will be generalizations. If there are nuances that you, pithy listener, feel need to be included, reach out.
Oh, yeah.
We are not above acknowledging when we get things not quite right or outright wrong, and in a story that has largely been told through the Western lens, it is important to us that we get this right.
Agreed. We definitely want to make sure that we are presenting all sides of this, especially since, at least every time I present, I show how truly bad the Western Christendom situation was.
I think we are pretty fairly harsh on
the Crusaders,
on the church as an organization as a whole. From the very beginning, we have not been kind to the Catholic Church.
Historically, this has nothing to do with the actual religion.
But historically, they're not
Historically, the Catholic Church is not a great entity in terms of, you know, how they treat people.
They're really not living out their mission, as we say in the nonprofit world.
There we go.
Gosh,
yeah.
That was the coldest burn.
Ice cold.
Let's jump in.
Ice, baby.
The Islamic and Chinese civilizations were the most successful in Eurasia in the 11th century. The Abbasid Caliphate is still perceived as the golden age of medieval Islam because of their expansive trade and the fact that the empire stretched from the Atlantic to the Indus River.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, I felt like it was very important to kind of do a very, very, very generalized look at Muhammad and the religion as a whole. Muhammad was a prophet who believed that he was standing in the prophetic lineage of the Hebrew prophets, which I did not know.
Oh, really?
Did not know. He claimed to be one of the last in the series of prophets that included Hebrews, Christians, and the culmination of Jesus. So he began seeing visions that he claimed were direct messages from God. And let's be fair, they aren't that radical given the time.
No, there's a lot of visions from...
And even what God was saying was not that crazy. So no pagan cults or ritual sacrifices, aka don't kill each other. A purification of belief, which, maybe like this is kind of the radical part, but Christians were doing this plenty.
Yeah. Over and over and over again, actually.
Yeah, a lot of the Crusades were even killing Christians who weren't their kind of Christians, like the Armenian Christians. And when they would take these cities, they killed indiscriminately. So it didn't matter if you were a Muslim, if you were a Jew, or if you were a Christian. You were in a caliphate-controlled city, so sucks to suck.
Yep. Like the time they laid siege to Nicaea, a city held by fellow Christians. Oops!
Whoopsie daisy.
As they made their way to Jerusalem, they encountered some interesting detours. My bad.
The final thing was the return to a single God of Abraham and submit to his will. So, I grew up in the Deep South, in case you can't hear it.
What?
During the height of misinformation about Muslims and their beliefs. So let me myth bust some beliefs and some things that I was told for those who may have been in a similar situation. Muslims do not worship Muhammad. In fact, it is very problematic to say that.
Yeah, it's just wrong. They worship God. Or Allah.
I mean, when we were in high school, that was absolutely not what we were taught. And we certainly weren't taught that Allah was just another name for the Abrahamic God.
Seriously?
It was literally called, by the Wall Street Journal, the Corridor of Shame. And I still managed to get out. So there is hope.
I'm going to apologize right now for Erica because my high school, while still in the South, did teach me these things.
Yeah. Oh, we were thick in the belt.
Yeah, you were cinched in tight.
So, they don't worship Muhammad. He is a prophet, not a god. They honor the God of Abraham. And yes, there is a House of Islam and the House of War. House of Islam is for your believers, and the House of War is basically saying, oh, hey, you're not a believer. I can move into your space, into your land, without offending the House of Islam.
The Islamic world, especially at this time, was incredibly tolerant of other religions. So at the time, if you're looking at who was taking the high road, it was the Islamic world.
As some know, Muhammad was not initially successful. He was run out of Mecca and wrote the Leaf of Law, or Sharif, in Medina. He was seen not only as a religious leader, but also as a statesman. And in that, he was successful in Medina. He united his followers into an army and overpowered Mecca in a series of armed conflicts. And for the first time, the Arabian community was united by something other than hearth and kin. And this was the beginning, but the nightmare of all hereditary institutions prevailed. A succession crisis.
Always.
Always. Because guess what? He only had a daughter.
Shite.
I know.
Why can they not just have sons? Figure your stuff out.
By the 11th century, Islam, as a world religion, had impressive credentials, but a succession crisis complicated the situation. The first 3 caliphs after Muhammad had been elected by a college of leading Muslims. In all 3 elections, Ali, a cousin of Muhammad and the husband to Fatima, the Prophet's only daughter, was a prime candidate.
Always the son-in-law.
Some saw Ali as the logical successor to Muhammad, but he was not popular with the original leadership of the Muslims and was passed over twice for the caliphate.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, you know he had to be bad to be married to Muhammad's daughter.
The only connection. Yeah, it's not good.
And still be like, dude, you just ain't it.
Yeah.
In 657, the Arab army in Egypt rebelled and marched on Medina, murdered the then reigning Caliph Uthman. Egyptian partisans, later known as Shia or Shiites, offered the caliphate to Ali, and he accepted.
Obviously, he was pretty desperate.
He was opposed by the governor of Syria, and, of course, civil war ensued. Shock and awe. The war did end in 661 when the sectarian extremists killed Ali.
Oops.
Muawiyah, the governor of Syria, was proclaimed caliph.
You know, it's amazing how two very different cultures can have a very similar succession crisis.
Dude, just wait.
The men just are like, but we need a man.
It just keeps going.
Of course.
At this point, the early 1000s, we have some different caliphates going around. But there are two main ones.
What is a caliphate?
Good question. From the Britannica, a caliphate is a political religious state compromising the Muslim community and the lands and people under its dominion. Mm-hmm. The kingdom ruled by a political and religious leader. They are the same person.
They are one and the same.
It is not like in the Western world,
where you have a Holy Roman Emperor who has to be proclaimed by the Pope. Okay.
And let's be clear, it is not the same as the Byzantines, who have patriarchs and emperors.
That work more closely in tandem, but still
and they are hand in glove.
Two separate people. This is one guy.
Right. This is one person. Muhammad's vision was that there would be an ummah, a single body of believers. But with civil war, you can't have a single body. And so now we have two main caliphates. The Fatimid Caliphate, which is folks who believe that Muhammad's son-in-law, by right of his marriage to Fatima, Muhammad's only daughter, should be the caliph. And they ruled in Cairo.
So despite the fact that he was murdered, they still, continued along that belief system.
Right.
Got it. He was murdered then. Okay.
Yeah, he'd already been murdered, but they had kids too, Husain and Hussein, and then you move down from there. So it's still a hereditary situation. It just has to have come from Fatima and Ali. Then there's the Abbasid Caliphate, which we'll talk even more about, because the Fatimids kind of stay out of it for the most part.
Just because of locale, yeah.
Yeah, but the Abbasids are the ones who are really in it. They were the folks who believed the descendants of the Rashidun, the rightly fated caliphs, should rule. And they ruled in Baghdad.
Right.
Now, sometimes the Fatimids and Abbasids would work together, but largely they did not.
I think it's a lot like patriarchs versus popes.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very similar religious upbringing and background and belief system, but it is all about who has that final say that changes things up. But it doesn't mean that you can't come together to defeat some other religion that you don't like.
So, while there were other caliphates, these are the two major players for the episode.
So it's all about, for half of them, making sure that they follow Fatima and her lineage through her children, if not her husband.
Right.
Whereas the others were like, nah, we're gonna go with a guy.
Yeah.
I already have a preference.
Yeah. Fatima's sons were Hassan and Hussein, the second and third Shia imams, respectively. And what's really interesting is Fatima has been compared to Mary, the mother of Jesus, especially in Shia Islam. Muhammad is said to have regarded her as the best of women.
I mean, yeah.
And the dearest person to him. She's often viewed as an ultimate archetype for Muslim women and an example of compassion, generosity, enduring suffering. And it's through...
Oh, fun. The enduring suffering. Why is that always a requirement to be an important woman in a religion? You must suffer.
I don't know. To be a woman is to suffer.
Beauty is pain.
It is through Fatima that Muhammad's family line has survived even to this date, which I think is great.
To this day, really?
To this day.
That's cool.
Controversy surrounds Fatima's death within 6 months of Muhammad.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
Sunni Islam holds that Fatima died from grief.
She'd had a lot of grief already. I feel like if grief was going to knock her out, it would have done so before.
Yeah. In Shia Islam, Fatima's miscarriage and death are said to have been a direct result of her injuries during a raid on her house to subdue Ali, ordered by Abu Bakr, the caliph. They were like, we don't support you.
Oh, great.
It is believed that Fatima's dying wish was that the caliph should not attend her funeral. She was buried secretly at night, and her exact burial place remains uncertain.
I like that. It's always nice to have a mystery. But I can't imagine that her dying words were,
"Don't come."
make sure he doesn't show up at my funeral.
Yeah, I don't either.
Okay.
How did their lives differ from Western ones?
They were better.
Yes, they were overall better. And it was really religious tolerance, which you touched on earlier in the episode.
It's my favorite fact about them.
I mean, it's an amazing fact because
It's an amazing fact.
I had always seen it, or it was always presented to me that conversion at the end of a sword, and that was not the situation.
No, not at all.
In fact, they had a head tax. If you weren't Muslim, you paid a tax, which didn't seem to be outrageous in my research. It wasn't like it's going to cripple you or put you in financial ruin.
It's not like when the Spanish kicked out the Jews and said, you can give us literally everything you own and stay. No, it was just a yearly little payment.
And that was to practice your religion in relative peace. There were perks, of course. If you were a Muslim, you could ride a horse and learn to handle weapons.
You couldn't ride a horse if you weren't Muslim?
No, you probably had to do a pony, or you had to do a donkey.
Camel.
Whatever was available.
I can tell you, riding a camel is incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah. You also couldn't handle weapons, which it's not an outrageous thing.
Nope.
Their military, because of this, was comprised completely of Muslims, and many folks converted to join the military. That was a way to come up in the world.
That's like people who join the U.S. military for citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite common.
Very common. So, this empire is doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, guess what?
What?
We have the Seljuk Turks coming in.
Oh, no, not them.
Oh, yes.
The bane of the Crusaders' existence.
So,
actually, the bane of the Byzantines' existence.
During the 10th century, migrations of Turkic peoples from Central Asia and Southeast Russia were led by a man named Seljuk.
Hey, look at that.
Look at that. They settled in the lower reaches of the Xerxes River and later converted to the Sunni form of Islam, and we'll get into why in just a minute. Seljuk had two grandsons, Shagri Bey and Togrul Bey, and they enlisted Persian support to win realms of their own. Shagri controlling the greater part of Khorasan and Togrul at his death in 1063, heading an empire that included western Iran and Mesopotamia. So
a big empire.
Pretty big.
No small potatoes.
Because of Togrul Bey's victory over the Buyids in Baghdad, the Seljuks came to be seen as the restorers of Muslim unity under the Sunni Caliphate. While Alp Arslan, who we talked a little bit about earlier, and Malik Shah expanded the empire to the frontier of Egypt, the Seljuk vizier, Nizam al-Mulk, oversaw the empire's organization during both of their reigns. The Seljuk Empire, political as well as religious in character, remember, they're
hand in hand. They are the same person.
They left a really strong legacy in the Islamic world, and during the Seljuk period, a network of Islamic colleges were founded, capable of giving uniform training to the state's administrators and religious scholars. So, like the Byzantines, they had a bit more of that bureaucratic class, and they were educating them in a very good
Literacy
way.
wasn't scorned?
Shock. They cared about grammar.
No.
Persian cultural autonomy flourished in the Seljuk Empire because the Turkoman Seljuks had no Islamic tradition or strong literary heritage of their own. They adopted the cultural language of the Persian instructors.
They really were like a nomadic tribe that was like, this is better. Yeah. Let's settle. Let's adopt all of this religion and learning and culture.
Yeah, this sounds better.
It sounds like they really just flourished.
Literary Persian thus spread to the whole of Iran, and the Arabic language disappeared in that country except in the works of religious scholarship, which is wild to me.
Like Latin.
Under the Sultan, Alp Arslan, and Malik Shah, the Seljuk Empire was extended to include all of Iran, Mesopotamia, and Syria, including Palestine.
Which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Jerusalem.
And in 1071, Alp Arslan defeated an immense Byzantine army at Manzikert, which we talked a little bit about earlier this week, and captured the Byzantine Emperor Romanus IV Diogenes. The way was open for Turkoman Seljuks to settle in Asia Minor.
Oh no!
The Seljuk Empire was unable to prevent the rise of a Shia sect thought to be responsible for the killing of the vizier Nizam al-Mulk in 1092. More importantly, the empire was undermined by the Seljuks' practice of shock, dividing provinces among a deceased ruler's sons, thus creating independent and unstable principalities. And believe it or not, power struggles ensued. And this is why they were so ripe for the taking. But let's talk just a smidge about what their military was like. We know they had to be all Muslim.
Yeah.
And the Seljuks were super prized for their military might. So...
And brutality, as I recall.
Well, yeah, because before they even became Muslim, they were used as tribal regiments. They were bought and sold slave warriors, and they were highly prized for their skill and lethality. And because of that, even though they were slaves, they did rise through the ranks. Called the Ghazi warrior. They had a composite bow. They rode a pony, which I was shocked by. Apparently they're really effective, really sturdy ponies.
Okay.
Armor was leather scaled armor, but as they became more affluent, they would invest in the metal mail style of armor of the Abbasids or traditional Chinese armor, which, like, God, wouldn't you have loved to see that?
Ooh.
They were really prolific with their tactics. They would do these cavalry-style attacks, shower them with arrows, lure them into a disadvantageous position, and then ride through them, cutting them down with a scimitar and mace. And they would repeat this until the enemy was defeated.
Sounds terrible.
Caroline.
Erica.
Have you ever heard of the vodka hashish line?
No. What have I been missing? Vodka and hashish. That's a fun experience.
As we have talked about, the Seljuk Turks hired themselves out to protect trade routes between Russia and China and a couple others along the way. And there is this theory about why they converted to Islam rather than to Christianity.
Ooh. Because they had their choice, I guess.
It is believed that it really aligned more with their spiritual beliefs. They were shamanists, so they believed in the spirits of the ancestors and would take psychedelics to see and commune with the ancestors for guidance. And these men were called Dashamids, so they're holy men, and they were one of the few selected that could
partake,
go on these trips,
it's
for
a trip,
lack of a better word, and be like, this is what such and such from way back says. This was very closely linked with the Imam of the Islamic faith who saw visions of the other world when he, smoked some hash.
All right then.
So in the Turkish steppes, Islam reigned because it was closer to what they believed in their own shaman religion.
It is like any time an older culture is absorbed, they tend to identify with religions that are similar in nature to the one that they'd practiced before. Mm-hmm. Even in the glorious cathedrals, the only things made of stone in the dark and Middle Ages, there are hidden pagan references throughout the whole thing because people were like, well, just in case, I'm going to add in these old gods too.
Yeah.
Even though they were shrines to the Christian world.
Whoopsie-daisy.
They actually had quite a few pagan symbols or even just legitimate images of pagan gods put in them.
And those of the Seljuks who did convert to Christianity just happened to be much closer to Russia, where they needed vodka to stay warm in the winter.
Valid.
Not a joke.
Valid.
All of this to say, there was quite the power vacuum when they took over. And then there was a power vacuum again because they continued to divide this land up.
Stop dividing amongst your sons.
Just don't
Pick
do
a
it.
favorite and pass it all. I don't know how many times we have to say it.
Mm-hmm.
They're clearly a military might, hashish or not. But did these visions tell them that the crusaders were coming? Did they have some notice?
No.
Oh,
No.
that's unfortunate. You'd think that would be a very helpful vision.
It would be. But here's the thing. I don't even think they were looking in that direction. You know why?
Why?
They had been in possession of Jerusalem over 400 years.
What? They didn't just anticipate a massive horde of Western Christians who had never seen it before coming to take it?
400 years they have had this city.
Uh-oh. Don't get cocky.
The Abbasid writer Al-Masudi, writing in the 11th century, described the Franks as numerous, courageous, well-organized, well-disciplined people with a vast, unified realm. However, he also goes on to describe Western Europe. As regards to the people of the northern quadrant, they are the ones from whom the sun is distant from the zenith. The power of the sun is weak among them because of their distance from it. The warm humor is lacking among them. Their bodies are large, their natures gross, their manners harsh, their understanding dull, and their tongues heavy. Not wrong. Their color is so excessively white that it passes from white to blue.
Honestly, not wrong.
Their skin is thin and their flesh thick. Their eyes are also blue, matching the character of their coloring. Their hair is lank and reddish because of the prevalence of damp mists.
That's why it's reddish? God, I've been spending a fortune on dye. I could just put it in damp mist.
According to Al-Masudi,
He must know.
he should be your cosmetologist. Their religious beliefs lack solidity, and this is because of the nature of the cold and the lack of warmth, unquote.
I love that the reason everything has gone wrong for them is the fact that it's cold.
Yeah.
As someone who's recently moved from a very warm climate to a very cold climate, I must agree that it is easier to live in the warmth.
You're gonna get it. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm gonna get there.
Lots of boots and leggings and sweaters.
Leggings are not enough.
Oh.
No.
The Islamic world was not ready for the invaders, the crusaders.
They looked down upon the crusaders for good reason, as being
for good reason.
uneducated, heavy-tongued.
Heavy tongues.
I don't know that they should be looked down upon for their blue pale skin, because I feature that heavily. But it makes sense that they look down upon them as kind of
brutes.
dumb brutes. At the same time, they're having the exact same issues that are going on in Western Europe, where they just can't keep their lands together because they keep decentralizing power because they don't want to piss off one of their sons.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right. They were trying to control themselves and hadn't really prepared to unite against the heavy tongues.
Well, and pilgrimages were still happening. It wasn't like they had said no more pilgrimages and that's what predicated all of this. They were still getting to go.
Yep.
We refer to the Crusades as the Crusades, but it was just, quote, an armed pilgrimage.
We're just gonna go and fight our way through.
The Seljuk Turks, it is not in their best interest to interfere with the pilgrimages because that's where they were getting money.
And they had a religious tolerance. They really were fine as long as you paid your head tax. You could be whatever you wanted to be. And there were, within Jerusalem itself, active aspects of Christian, Jewish, and Muslim religions that were allowed to practice there in peace, relative
peace, yeah. And that, my friends, is that.
I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are pithily yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!